18 minutes before 8, it's Cabinet Reshuffle morning. That is the conversation that we've been having this morning. Thank you for your tweets. I promise you we will put them back on the screen and get some more of your views coming through. But we've got some more political commentators with us this morning. So let's just continue on this analysis. Political commentator, as I say, and financial accounting lecturer at WITS, Khaya Sithole, said this. I'd like to quote an abbreviated excerpt from an article that he wrote recently, and it was published in the Mail and Guardian. So basically what he said is, quote, having done so much work to achieve his long-held ambition of running the ANC in the country, it would be tragic if Ramaphosa's tenure were to be the most abrupt of them all. Zuma will be gone soon anyway. Ramaphosa has to think beyond the Zuma years and puts an end to the governance by hysteria, because if he doesn't, he will be the biggest victim of the current chaos. Mistakes in dealing with the Zuma exit will leave us all with the prospect of a David Mabuza presidency much sooner than we all thought. Now, as I say, the man who wrote that is on the line with us, Khaya Sithole. Khaya, good morning to you. So, David Mabuza is one man away from the presidency of South Africa. Are your predictions perhaps coming true?
You know, when I wrote that, I was actually still hoping we'd have an 18-month moratorium before David Mabuza becomes the deputy president of the country. And the reality is that now we're essentially one heartbeat away from him being the president of the country. And for me, the reason I said that is that I still feel that, you know, when you have a process where the NEC can recall a president and not furnish him with reason, you run the risk that at some point in time, this current NEC would essentially start exhibiting the same behavior towards Cyril Ramaphosa. And of course, the man who will be in prime position to take over the presidency of the country would then be DP Mabuza. So I still think it's a very dangerous precedent that has been set, firstly with President Thabo Mbeki and now with President Jacob Zuma. And I think now that David Mabuza is now officially the deputy president of the country, it really makes Cyril Ramaphosa's role very, 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 tense in my view. And I still think that he could have found a way of managing the Jacob Zuma exit in a way that doesn't now leave him exposed to essentially the question of when will the NEC do what it's done already when he is now going to be the victim.
What could he have done differently? I mean, when you say that he has left himself exposed, what mistakes has he made?
I think for me, what was missing is that you should have got the NEC to really cast in stone what the guidelines for a recall of a sitting president are. So you need to be able to say that we as the ANC will only ever recall a sitting president under these particular circumstances, whether they get implicated in criminal issues or something like that, but something that everybody can sort of understand. But the inability to do that simply means that we still don't know what the basis for the next recall might be. And for me, why I call it governance by hysteria is that essentially in 2008, it was because the Jacob Zuma faction dominated the NEC, which is how they could facilitate a recall without really having to explain it to the public. Now we've had an NEC that was against Jacob Zuma, and of course they did the same thing. They simply said we're going to recall the president. So President Ramaphosa's biggest problem now is to ensure that he keeps as much of the NEC on his side so that this situation does not recur. And if you look at what happened yesterday, you get the impression that he doesn't have absolute control over the National Executive Committee, just like Jacob Zuma had for about a 10-year period. So I think it makes his life even more difficult, and it was not necessary. If he had taken this process through the parliament where, a motion of no confidence is processed and then the entire cabinet was dissolved, then he would have got away from this idea that now we all know that the NEC can decide at any point in time who the president of the country is, and they should recall that person and install the next one there. So I do think that the precedents that have been set are problematic for him particularly.
Is this a compromise cabinet? I mean, when you look at the announcement that was made last night, do you think that this is I mean, obviously we could see that there were some that had been spoken about for a very, very long time saying that they are going to be coming back, they will be going into those positions, they're the right people for the job. But there are others that have massive question marks over them, and many people asking, why? Why would our president put these people into these positions? And again, I go back to the question, is this a compromise cabinet? Is this a reflection of those deals that were made at Nasrec?
There is no doubt that this is an alliance of the compromise, and how that really panned out is that the reality is that President Ramaphosa did not secure an overwhelming mandate from Nasrec. So, of course, there are people that were essentially on the other side of the table who still command significant influence within the ANC. One example would be Minister Batabile Dlamini, who, of course, is the president of the ANC Women's League, which is a core constituent of the ANC. And you don't have the latitude to simply check her out overnight, because then obviously, her constituency might not react very well to that particular process. So you have to start managing those particular processes. But I think that we do have to give him credit for at least having identified the ministers that were primarily involved in the whole state capture scandal, and then saying that when it comes to those, we will not negotiate. We really have to chuck out at least the greater majority of them. But I feel that on the governance side, where the ministers were underperforming their role, he wasn't as thorough in cleaning them out of cabinet. So, of course, this is how you end up with a very compromised system, which is what we're seeing now.
Yeah. Just finally, Khaya, I mean, do you think that... do you believe we're still in that current chaos that we've been so worried about? Or is this the new dawn? Because there seems to be a much more up-tempo feeling amongst South Africans. But after what we heard last night, are we now a little bit more concerned than we were before this announcement?
Yeah, and I think some of us have been cautioning against this hysteria that we've been witnessing for the past couple of weeks, where people suddenly thought that there's a brand new ANC in town. There is no such thing. The ANC remains what it was a few weeks ago. Only change was simply the figurehead. But of course, that figurehead operates within a very tightly controlled political machination, which he has to respect. And we are seeing that being exhibited here, where clearly he didn't get things his own way. So, of course, now the question is, would he have done things differently if he had the ability to do so? I'd like to think that he wanted a bit more freedom to do the things that he wanted to do. The reality is that political concessions took over. And the reality is that he now has to pay the debt of the deals that are signed with Nasrec, whatever that might turn out to be. So I do think that we have to be as skeptical as we were under President Jacob Zuma and say, well, actually, it looks like he has put party interests above the issues of governance, because the reality here is that he has gone for the unity of the ANC rather than the advancement of society at large.
All right, Khaya, I'm going to leave it there with you. Thank you very, very much for your opinions and talking to us here on the program. Still with me, we spoke to him at the beginning of the program, but I just want to wrap it up with Lebohane Ndo, who is also a political analyst. Quite a pessimistic Khaya Sithole that we heard from there. A lot of people were feeling a little bit more optimistic, but after listening to what Khaya has said, should we be skeptical? Should we be worried about what we heard last night and this new list of leadership that we see ourselves under?
Indeed, we need to be very, very skeptical. But let's go back to what we said earlier on, that this is not a Cyril Ramaphosa's cabinet. This is the cabinet that has been introduced after a lot of considerations. The alliance, the unity project of the ANC, and the political space that the ANC has to occupy. But another area that I think we are avoiding to touch on is that there are more than 10 ministers that have not been reappointed because they are seen to have been associated with the emails that have been circulated last year. And that is an area that we're not touching on. But I think the focus that we have now, it's mainly on the about 4 or 5 ministers that have been reappointed. But I think in terms of re-energizing government and bringing in people that have got skills, people who have been tested before, I think the president has actually performed very, very well. But whether we like it or not, we need to be very, very skeptical, because the names that are being mentioned from the deputy president, Malusi Gigaba, Batabile Dlamini and others, those are the ministers that are still surrounded by some form of controversy. And indeed, we need to be very, very much worried about those.
Lebohane, thank you. Thanks very, very much for your opinions here on the program. Closing up the analysis here, but we're going to take a break. When we return, political parties giving us their response. First up would be Narit Singh. He will also chat to us about how they feel about the new cabinet. He's there in our parliamentary studios waiting. Do stay tuned.